We definitely explored the fact that Chris's father was at the police department at that moment. He had already talked about his father being his hero. We wanted to bring up Chris's father because we knew how important he was in his life. We knew that Chris, if he was honest with anyone, it would probably be his father. He trusted his father. That was very clear to us. He thought the world of his father. So we wanted to let him know, like, your father would want you to tell the truth too.
Can I talk to my dad or something?
Absolutely.
Come.
Do you want to bring him in here?
No, I just need to talk to my dad. Like, he flew across the country. I can't.
How about this? If we brought your dad in here, would you please tell him what happened?
When Chris asked to talk to his dad, it was immediately concerning for Special Agent Coder and myself. We didn't know where Ronnie's head was. We didn't know if Ronnie was out in the lobby upset, if he was like, why is my kid back there so long? If Ronnie would come in and, convince his kid to get a lawyer and, leave. And there were so many things in play at that moment that it was such a risky move. And we had to really make a split-second decision on whether we could allow Ronnie back into the interrogation room or not. There were extreme risks for us as far as allowing Ronnie to go into the room with Chris. We didn't know if, he was going to be a protective father. He was going to tell him, get a lawyer, you need to leave, don't tell them anything. We had no idea what we were stepping out of and into. After we decided to allow Ronnie into the room, Special Agent Coder and I went to talk to Ronnie in private ahead of time. We discussed with him that Chris was willing to tell him the truth about everything, and we just encouraged Ronnie to be a good listener, encouraged Chris to come forth with what the truth was, and he was very, very receptive to that.
She heard him? Yeah. And well, no, not her. You're her. I can see, like, she's not. Well, choking her girl. Did she kill him? They're blue. Both of them. Yeah. She choked both of them to death. I freaked out when you said me.
It was pretty much gut-wrenching to hear Chris talk about the fact that he murdered his wife to his own father. I didn't think Chris would actually admit to anything to his father. I had hoped he would, but to actually hear that come out of his mouth was shocking. It was the theme of Shanann doing something to the girls that I had just given him prior to leaving the room, but I felt like we were making progress. Immediately after Chris had admitted to his father that he had murdered his wife because she had murdered the girls, we knew immediately we needed to get back in there. We didn't know at that point what Ronnie's reaction was going to be, so time was of the essence for us to get back in there so that we could redirect the interview and try and get more of the facts and more of the truth.
That was one of the things that struck me, was that Shanann was buried in a shallow grave and the kids were separated and discarded in tanks. I'm not sure why you wouldn't keep them all together, but I think psychologically that probably says something about him separating all three of them. It tells me that, we look at organized criminals versus unorganized criminals, that it might not have been as planned out or structured or ill-structured crime scenes. I don't know how long he had planned it, but things psychologically, when we look at some of these crimes, we look at their behavior. Why would you separate the family like that?
I think the media interest in part, and the public interest in part, is driven by the fact that, they're a beautiful family, a young family. Shanann's life is so accessible through her Facebook page. You can spend hours scrolling through there and feel like you know who she is, which makes you care, right? When a person is no longer just a statistic or a data point that's gone missing, you can empathize with her and her family, because you look at her kids and you see your own kids, or you look at her house and her dreams and you see your own house and your own dreams, and then see how quickly it can all be put into jeopardy. He obliterated his family and everything that he knew, right? And in that moment, in those acts, he cut ties with everybody he had ever been friends with and all his family. When you see a husband kill his wife and 2 kids, often that's a symptom of escalating domestic violence, and it's kind of like a last straw thing. There's never been any evidence that that's the case here. There's never been any documented incidents of domestic violence in the Watts family. So this just seemed to come out of nowhere. It didn't even fit what we know about when men kill their entire family. Everybody connected to the case or watching the case, even after the sentencing, we're left with this question of why did he do it? The prosecutor's office gave one theory that they had, that Chris wanted a new life with his girlfriend, and that killing his family was the way that he was gonna do it. That was never satisfying to me, and I don't think it was satisfying to the investigators either, because there's just so many questions, like, why not just get a divorce? I think the judge even said that on the stand. There's so many other ways if you want to start a new life to go about that. This is such a dark and horrible way to do it. And those questions persisted for months after the sentencing.
I think all the investigators that had anything to do with this case had some kind of unanswered questions that nagged at us, which is also why the investigators went back and interviewed him, to get some answers, to finally get some closure.
The interview process can make or break a case. We can spend years working on a case and then we get our suspect. And if we don't take the time to actually find out who that person is, develop themes of trying to get them to confess or making it easier for them to tell us what the truth is, the whole case could be lost. I mean, we could have tons of physical evidence, but jurors want to know that this person admitted to it too. There was an immediate sense of urgency to get Chris down to the police department. We had asked if he had already been interviewed, and Detective Baumhofer said that he had been interviewed over body cam, which we knew we need him in a room with us that's recorded, video, audio, and we need to get his story down. We needed to know exactly what happened, and as many times as we can get him to reiterate that same story is a benefit to us, because obviously we're looking for nuances, we're looking for discrepancies, we're looking for anything that would give us a clue. Hearing his story, sometimes it makes us go back and reformulate what we're asking him, because maybe sometimes we're not asking him the right question. Chris seemed very calm during his interview. A few times he seemed to get frustrated with Special Agent Coder over certain questions that he was asked, mostly related to what conversation he and Shanann had had right before he left for work. It was extremely important for Special Agent Coder to dig into the reason behind their emotional conversation, or what exactly was said. Chris had filled out a written statement about what was said, and it was very interesting because Chris wrote probably a paragraph about packing up for work that day, loading his truck, things like that. Pretty much one line about his emotional conversation with his wife, and then another paragraph of what he did after that, going to work and things like that. So we knew the important stuff is with this emotional conversation that he is neglecting to talk to us about. Obviously our goal was to minimize and allow him to have Chris to have some justification in what he had done. Special Agent Coder had brought up the fact that maybe it was Shanann's fault. It's common in these types of cases that there's some victim blaming, so that it's easier for the suspect to say, yeah, it wasn't all just me. Like, I did it because they pushed me to it, or I was forced to do it, or some other reason. So we definitely knew Shanann was the stronger personality of the two. So we wanted to use that to our benefit as far as giving Chris a possible reason as to why this would have happened. The second I had brought that theme up to him, his eyes lit up. And I knew to myself, this is the one he wants. This is the theme he wants to go with. He wants to put the blame on her. Vilifying Shanann in the way I felt like we had to do in that instance was a way that we could move forward. It was a stepping stone for us in the investigation so that we could get one more piece. If we could have him admit to even murdering one of them and then, telling us where they were, we would get answers even from that. We just needed to find Shanann and the girls. That was our biggest focus. And we needed to know what he was willing to admit and what he wasn't willing to admit.
Understand why she passed.